I mean, thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Linda.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Linda Zupan, Associate Minister here at Crystal Coast Unity. Sabbath. It's an old-fashioned word with its origins in the Hebrew word sabbat, to rest, coming to us through Greek and Latin and Old English. For Jewish people, Sabbath is a day of rest and worship mandated by Mosaic law, observed from sundown on Friday to the appearance of the first 3 stars in the sky on Saturday evening. Saturday is, after all, the 7th day, as cited in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. From Hebrew scripture, Genesis 2, verse 3, "So God blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation." Also from the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 20, verse 11 reads, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it." And one more from Christian scripture in Hebrews chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. "So then a Sabbath rest still remains for the people of God. For those who enter God's rest also cease from their labors, as God did from his." In 321 CE, Common Era, the Roman Empire, Constantine the Great, enacted the first civil law establishing Sunday as a day of rest from toil. You may remember that Constantine was also the head of the Christian church at that time as well. The declaration of rest on the venerable day of the sun did not refer to the Sabbath by name. It simply decreed a day of rest for those in the cities, exempting agricultural workers in the country unless those workers chose to continue to toil. Later, the Christian church recognized Sunday, the first day of the week, as the Lord's Day, in concert with the day that Christ rose from the dead. Wikipedia cites the Catechism of the Council of Trent in the mid-1500s as stating, "The Church of God has thought it well to transfer the celebration and observation of the Sabbath to Sunday. For our ancestors, the Sabbath day was a much-needed day, a much-needed respite from the ongoing work of living, the gathering, the toiling, the cleaning, the cooking, the hunting, the building. We know that in ancient times, work was never ending for most. Only the ruling class, only the wealthy, had a choice about leisure. And really, for many of us, those ancient times might be only a generation or 2 back. I remember how hard my grandfather, my father's father, worked. He was a railroad yard man. In particular, I recall how lost he was this one vacation that he and my grandmother took to visit us, traveling from their home in Wisconsin to visit us in Northern Virginia. He didn't know what to do with himself. Grandpa wasn't at all interested in sightseeing, and he certainly didn't want to gab with the women folk or play with his grandchildren. I remember as a child of 10 or so, my parents holding whispered conversations about how to deal with Grandpa. Finally, after much thought, my dad found him a project, hard labor, breaking up asphalt in our driveway with a pickaxe and hauling it away, one heavy wheelboat load after another. And then Grandpa seemed happy because he had something useful to do. Wayne Muller, in his book Sabbath, Restoring the Sacred Rhythm of Rest, tells us that Sabbath need not be a day or time apart. I quote, "Sabbath does not require us to leave home, change jobs, go on retreat, or leave the world of ordinary life." Close quote. When Sunday mornings at Crystal Coast Unity feed you, you are keeping the Sabbath. When a walk on the beach restores you, you are keeping the Sabbath. When you paint or write or sew or read or sing or laugh or talk or cry or pray or meditate, whether alone or with someone else in a way that renews you, you are keeping the Sabbath. In the book A History of God, Karen Armstrong writes that in observing Sabbath rest, we, like the Hebrew people, participate in a ritual that God originally observed alone. It is a, quote, symbolic attempt to live the divine life, end quote. We in Unity often speak of our humanity and our divinity as innate and inseparable parts of our nature. Sabbath is a way to recognize this. Wayne Muller reminds us that if we need a role model for taking care of ourselves in this way, we need look no further than Jesus. Again, in his book, Sabbath, Restoring the Sacred Rhythm of Rest, Wayne writes, quote, "Jesus did not wait until everyone had been properly cared for, until all who sought him were healed. He did not ask permission to go, nor did he leave anyone behind on call, or even let his disciples know where he was going. Jesus obeyed a deeper rhythm. When the moment for rest had come, the time for healing was over. He would simply stop, retire to a quiet place, and pray." End quote. Because we are each individualized expressions of the divine, and the divine is inherently creative, and the divine is everything, there are many, many ways to keep the Sabbath. Sometimes they are solitary in nature, other times connection is key. Wayne Muller tells us that the Sabbath has a quality of being that is noticeable when we pay attention. He identifies it as, quote, "the presence of something that arises when we consecrate a period of time to listen to what is most deeply beautiful, nourishing, or true. It is time consecrated with our attention, our mindfulness, honoring those quiet forces of grace or spirit that sustain and heal us." End quote. I lived in the Metro DC area for most of my adult life. And when I moved to Missouri to attend seminary, it was a bit of a shock to discover that there, deep in the Bible Belt, many businesses observe a Sunday close. I grew to appreciate that reminder to slow down. And actually, it's one that I find to be echoed here in our North Carolina beach community, not necessarily on Sundays, but in our off season. Even those of us who are retired can find ourselves overcommitted and in need of renewal and restoration. Like other parts of nature, we humans require dormancy and rest so that when the time comes for growth and action, we have the reserves in place. Wayne Muller tells us, again, quote, "Sabbath is an incubator for wisdom. When we allow the rush and pressure of our days to fall away, even for a short period of time, we are more able to discern the essential truth of what lies before us." End quote. So I ask, where is your Sabbath time? Your time of rest? Your time of renewal? your time of restoration. For me, sometimes my Sabbath is in going apart. It's reflection, it's quietness, and sometimes my Sabbath is in community, in giving, in caring, in connecting, in serving. And I invite us to remember that Sabbath has many, many different faces for each of us. Going back to my grandfather for just a moment, I wonder if perhaps doing something for his son and his son's family was his restoration, his renewal. This morning's possibilities for practice come directly from Wayne Muller's website, and there are 12 of them. Don't go crazy. You may already do some of these things. The invitation here is to be mindful when you choose a practice that you are doing so in honor of Sabbath. So here we go, and these are all Wayne's words. I'm not going to do the quote-unquote thing. Light a candle. Set aside sacred time for a family meal, for prayer or meditation, or simply quiet reading. Set a candle before you, offer a simple blessing, and let the world fall away. Practice thanksgiving. Give thanks before meals, upon rising, when going to sleep. During Sabbath, we are less concerned with what is missing and more grateful for what has already been given. Bless your children. Place your hand gently on their heads and offer your blessing. What do you most wish for them? Self-knowledge, courage, safety, joy. Let them hear your prayers for their happiness. And as an aside, we can do this for friends too. Invite a Sabbath pause. Choose one common act, touching a doorknob, turning on a faucet, or hearing the phone ring. Throughout the day when this occurs, stop and take 3 silent, mindful breaths, and then go on. Take a walk. Stroll slowly to nowhere in particular for 30 minutes. Let your senses guide you. Stop and observe deeply whatever attracts you. A tree, a stone, a flower. Breathe. Pamper your body. Take a guilt-free nap. Take a leisurely bath with music, special scents, candles. Make love with your spouse. Walk barefoot in the grass. The Sabbath is a day of delight. Create a Sabbath box. Put your to-do list, your keys, your wallet, anything you don't need in Sabbath time into the box. Or write down a particular worry or concern and drop it in. Just for now, let it go. Turn off the telephone or the computer, the TV, the washer and the dryer. Create a period of time when you will not be disturbed or seduced by what our technologies demand of us. Prepare a Sabbath meal or a Sabbath cup of tea. Even if you are alone, you can choose foods you love, put flowers on the table, take time to enjoy every dish, give thanks for the bounty of the earth. Seek companionship. One of the most precious gifts we can offer is to be a place of refuge, a Sabbath for one another. Ask for companionship when you lose your way. Give quiet time and attention to others. Reset your inner compass. Make a list of the values and principles that guide your life, both those you follow and those you would like to follow. Speak them aloud, alone or with loved ones. And finally, surrender a problem. The Sabbath reminds us that forces larger than ourselves are at work healing the world. Imagine that these forces already know how to solve your problem. Turn it over to their care. And now, a Sabbath gift. I invite you to listen to this prayer from the Iona community in the United Kingdom and allow it to be a Sabbath moment we share this morning. The title of this prayer poem is In the Silence. I was tempted to use it for the meditation, but this is where it is. When the world tells us we are what we do with our activity, acuum, or achievement, let us learn. We are what we do with our silence. When the world tells us we are what we do with our spending power, selling power, or our power of speech, let us learn. We are what we do with our silence. When the world tells us to drown the silent sufferings of others with indifference or noise, or to forget the art of stillness, even in the storm, let us learn. We are what we do with our silence. When the world tells us to rush in where angels fear to tread, let us learn that angels listen first before they take a step for the voice of God in the silence. In closing, I believe that it is imperative that as part of our spiritual growth, we remember the Sabbath and honor ourselves and our communities with the remembrance. Every Sunday morning, here at Crystal Coast Unity, we display at the start of the service a slide that declares our purpose. We mindfully support the spiritual growth of individuals and raise the consciousness of our region and world. This remembering of the Sabbath, it is not just for our personal spiritual growth. This is also one of our contributions to the world. It is time now to surrender, to take a collective breath, to slow down, because we know, in the words of the Peter Mayer song that Cindy gifted us with just a few moments ago, when we remember the Sabbath, everything is holy now.